Welcome back, everybody. This is another video. This is my personal garage. I'm going to be doing a polyaspartic floor in here, and I'm going to be doing Cove base around the whole perimeter. So what I had done is I ground around the whole perimeter first to clean that concrete, just so I can get the Cove base up first. And then I'm going to grind the rest of the floor after I install the Cove base, because you'll end up getting little epoxy crumbs on the floor along the perimeter as you install the Cove base. So first thing we're going to do is start with the Cove strips. So these are little plastic strips with a self-adhesive backing to them, and there's a little top edge there. So you can peel the back off and stick it to the wall, and then put your Cove base on top of that, and you have a real nice termination point. Now, when you apply this, you take your Cove trowel and you run it along the wall, and you put your Cove strip on top of the Cove trowel as a guide. So that way, when you stick it to the wall, it's set to the right elevation. So you peel the back off. Sometimes it's a challenge to get it started, but you just set it on top of the trowel like that. You hold it with your thumb. You just stick it to it, and then as you slide the trowel along the wall, just keep the Cove sitting right on top of the trowel. You see how I guide it with my thumb there? And you're peeling the blue backing off as you go, and you can just slide right down the wall. It actually is extremely fast to install. Then when you work your way into a corner, I normally have an industrial scissors. I'll just cut it with the industrial scissors and tuck it in the corner and keep moving. It's pretty easy to work with. Just make your cut, stick it to the wall, and that's it. When you're at a corner, you just simply peel the back off. Now you're going the other direction. Obviously, you line up the strip, get your tool underneath there, guide it with your thumb, and do the same thing. I personally like to go clockwise with this material when I install it. I'm just going to work my way right around the perimeter. One thing you do want to make sure of when you're applying this to drywall especially is that the drywall is screwed well to the wood behind it. If you push really hard with your trowel and the drywall moves, the epoxy mortar is going to sag on you as you're applying it. So just make sure you have enough screws in the bottom, or plywood, whatever you're up against. Just make sure it doesn't move when you push hard. So somehow the sound dropped out of the original recording that I did, so I'm going to do my best to follow along with this and voice over. So now we're ready to mix up the Cove mortar. So what we have is the 18-pound Cove mortar kits, and that's my 4-inch Cove trowel to trowel the verticals. You can go 6-inch, but 6 inches is a challenge to get the bond to the wall. So these are the 18-pound mixes. You simply pull the tab and take the lid off. Everything is included in the bucket. So you pull the lid off. Inside you have the epoxy part A and B, and then the mortar sand, and that's a mix of fine and coarse sand for the Cove mortar. So pull the epoxy out. What I always like to do is take the sand from that bucket, pour it into another bucket. Then you're going to pour the epoxy from those two little containers back in the bucket that you started with. So you just take the lids off your epoxy, pour it in the 2-gallon bucket, and then mix your epoxy first. Always mix your epoxy first before you put the sand in it. That way it gets mixed thoroughly. If you don't mix the epoxy first, you're just going to have a sticky mess when you're done that probably will not set properly. So now at this point, I'm going to take the drill. Notice I have a different type of paddle on there for the mortar. That's actually a Milwaukee whole hog drill. So I'm going to mix that epoxy thoroughly first. And then once I mix that epoxy, I'm going to pour the sand into it. All right, so now pour the entire bucket of sand into it, mix it thoroughly. You might want to put your feet on both sides of the bucket, because if you don't, the bucket can start to spin on you, just because this material is fairly thick when you mix it all in. If you want, you could always hold back a little bit of sand. If it's a little thinner, it's actually easier to work with, but it can sag on you a little bit. So I just chose to pour it all in, but like I said, you could hold back a little bit of sand when you do it. I like the 18-pound mixes myself for garages. If you get a 36-pound mix, it's a lot of material, and you have about 25 minutes to get rid of it. It starts getting sticky on you otherwise. It doesn't go from, I'll say, liquid to solid instantly. It starts to get gooey, but it's not as easy to work with once it starts getting gooey. So I'll use a margin trowel, especially in small areas like this. I'm just doing between the man door and the garage, so it's only like a 16-inch space. It's hard to use any large tool in here. So I'm just going to get the margin trowel, get some material up against there, take your mortar, your Cove trowel, left to right motion or right to left, whatever makes you happy there. And you kind of have to work it on the surface a little bit. Again, small areas are much more difficult than big areas. I would rather do a large area any day. So you just got to play around with the edges there, trying to do some detail work, make it look pretty. So after you work this on the surface, you do get a nice smooth face on this. You want that rounded edge on the bottom. It's real easy to actually be way too critical about what you're doing here, especially if you're doing a full flake over it. It's going to cover a multitude of sins. If you're doing a neat coat with epoxy on top of this, you do want to pay particular attention and try to get it as perfect as possible. So now I'm just going to start working my way around the perimeter here and get this all dressed up. Again, trying to pay attention to the end wall there, just the detail stuff that I like to try to make look good if at all possible. So I'm killing a lot of time here. This is why you don't want a 36-pound mix, by the way. 18 is more than enough for working around perimeters in a garage, because you just have to work a little bit slowly. In this case here, sometimes you just have to use a finger to get a rounded edge in there, and you got to do what you got to do to get the shape you need. One thing I want to point out, you see the concrete underneath the mortar there, how it turns brown. That means that it is self-priming and it's wicking into the concrete. It's always important that whatever materials you use wick into the concrete like a primer does. And primers are extremely important. Everybody always hears me talking about primer and the need for a penetrating material below any coatings or repair materials. Just working my way around. So I get that outside corner formed there. That looks good. I'm going to mix up another batch. It's very important to keep your tools clean too, so you want to try to scrape on between coats if you can, so that gooey stuff doesn't get caught on there. It just makes it nice and easy if you have a nice clean trowel. So I'm going to continue my way around here. It is real easy to almost be too particular with this. I'm going to be doing a rounded edge at the bottom of the steps. I don't have, well, the step I should say, I don't have a termination strip there. I'm just going to run it up, and once you put the flake on top of it, you'll never see that lap joint there. I will take my hand grinder and I go over just to buzz off those crumbs. And this is also why I grind the floor after I do the Cove, because you're going to see little crumbs all over the floor as I go. It's just easy to grind the whole floor, and you grind them right off the next day. It's easy. Working my way right around the perimeter. Now I will say Cove mortar works great when you have, see the open joint there. Now, if the concrete moves, it's going to crack on that joint. No matter what you put in there, you're going to have the same potential. If you fill it with caulking and then put epoxy over it, the epoxy will still crack if the joint moves. So it's a given that that joint around the perimeter of your garage may or may not move in the future. It may crack. It's just the inherent risk of any coating in a garage. But the mortar goes right over that. You can trowel it in, it covers it up. At least when you put your epoxy floor down, you don't have to worry about the epoxy running down in that gap and also, keeping bugs and dirt and everything else out in the future. All right, working my way down the final wall. Okay, I'm just going to show how to clean the tools. I use acetone to clean the trowels. In this case here, I have a leftover rag. I'm just going to put acetone on the rag and then wipe the epoxy mortar off of the trowel. If you don't have acetone, I mean, you can probably use some other type of solvent, but you need some type of solvent to get the epoxy off of the tools. Okay, so now I'm all done. Any crumbs that you see on the top or bottom, they will come off very easily. I'm going to probably let this sit for a little bit. I'll just take a trowel and back drag it along that top edge. That will knock any of the crumbs off. And I'm also going to be grinding the whole thing, the whole floor anyway when I'm done. Okay, folks, we are back. Day number 2. Sorry, I'm watching the camera sway as I start here. Day number 2, I ground the perimeter. We installed all the epoxy mortar Cove base around the perimeter. Just from a quantity standpoint, we did 77 feet of epoxy mortar Cove with 4.125 cubic foot Cove kits. I have about half a kit left over, which you just have to throw away. So what it worked out to is exactly 22 feet per 0.125 cubic foot kit, just to let everybody know volume-wise what you're dealing with here. I'm going to start grinding in the corner. Again, I'm doing this with a hand grinder. I can't get my big trailer up the driveway, which is kind of typical with every house I buy, apparently. So I'm going to do it all by hand. It's in the 6 o'clock hour. It's really early, so I have the doors closed so I don't wake any neighbors up. So I'm going to show you a close-up of grinding, then I'll pan out. I'll set the camera back here, put it on time-lapse so you can watch me grind. Boy, I couldn't be more wrong. The second half went much slower than the first. So the diamond wheel I'm using is actually, I got it on eBay and it fits on my Hilti DG150. This particular wheel tears the heck out of the concrete. So that's what I'm using. If people want to know, they wear out quickly though. I use 2 of them for my garage floor. But keep in mind, I did have a very heavy coating that was almost 1/8 of an inch thick. So it did save a lot of time. Yes, it cost some money to get them, but it was well worth it. Okay, I am done grinding for the day. If you look real close here, I always like to show the scratch. There's a good scratch pattern in there. There was a lot of oil saturation in this concrete. So I'm going to let this air out for a couple days. They're calling for rain tomorrow anyway. I actually wanted to try to prime it today, but I'm going to let this dry out for a couple days because sometimes you get some moisture trapped under the coating. Now it can get released over the next couple days. I did not grind outside here yet. It's in direct sunlight. I figured I'll do it later. One thing I want to point out, this is almost like having a drain in the basement. You know how the drain is always the highest spot in the basement? Well, look at the level. The water is kicking into the house. So I'm going to need to grind really hard on the left edge there. I probably have to drop that down at least a half an inch so the water rolls out. Don't ask me how they poured it like that. Now the middle one, I don't know if you can see with the shade there. That's pretty much level. That I still need to grind down. And that one is just barely tapered inward to the house a little bit. So I got to grind that edge pretty good. I also have to do that really hard on this edge here. But I'm going to do that maybe tomorrow morning or something when the sun is not directly on me. All right, one thing I wanted to point out really quick. I ground this. This was probably 2 days ago. I was waiting for the rain to stop. The rain has stopped, but it's coming again tonight, so I still can't do the floor. This is why I wanted to let the floor breathe. See this stuff? Efflorescence has come up through the concrete. And this is right in the middle of the drive area where the car comes in. So apparently there's some over here too. So that's another reason why I need to prime this floor. It is very humid out today. It's got to be like 80–90% humidity. So obviously I'm going to vacuum this up good before I put the primer down. And I still have to do these outside areas probably tomorrow. Okay, so here we are. It is very sunny out. I'm going to, I can't even see the screen in the sun here. Hopefully this is coming out. But you can see that bubble, how high this is here. So I'm going to have to grind off, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch, maybe half an inch. We'll see what it is. I'm going to set the camera up on a tripod here. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I'll show you how I grind this out. It's going to be a little noisy. I'm sure I'm going to voice over here. Okay, that is now ground. You can see how heavy I went. You can see the stone exposure. And I got to tell you, if I go down any lower, this would be below the driveway, which I can't do. So I've done the best I can with what I have, but boy, did I ever have to grind a lot off of there. See, this over here came down, 3/4 of an inch at least. So anyway, I'm ground out. All I got to do is vacuum now, and I'm ready for primer. I'm probably not going to be able to do that for another day or two. Okay, finally I'm ready to apply coatings. I have a nice sunny day. It rained for like 3 days straight. Everything was saturated. I just got done doing the final vacuuming in here. I'll flip the camera around. I'll show you everything we have, and then we're going to be putting down the primer today. All right, so this is the final outcome of this slab. I ground down almost until I met the driveway. You can see the cross section of stone. I really had to grind hard, but you can see the cove around the perimeter. Ground the step there, ground everything. We are good to go. So now I'm going to mix up the primer. And then tomorrow I'm going to do both coats of the polyaspartic. I'll do one early in the morning and probably one just after lunch or something like that. So I'm going to set this camera up on a tripod and get moving. One thing I did want to point out, this is a 24-inch squeegee. That is an 18-inch, 1/4-inch nap epoxy glide roller. That's just a 6-inch roller for the edges. And then I have one of these cheap brushes just for corners and stuff that I can't get with the roller. Set that there. And then I have this is like a 3-inch mixing paddle that I use to mix the epoxy. I also have a pair of spiked shoes waiting right there, so I'm going to mix this material up, pour it out, and get going. And I'm getting wicked shadows today. The sun is really bright. So I'm just going to mix 2 gallons of this. This is the CFS Clear Prime. This is designed for the 1C Polyaspartic, which I will get into explaining exactly what that material is tomorrow. I know I say this every time I do a video. Whenever you mix epoxies, get the edges really good. See how I go around the perimeters here? Very, very important. That is what it looks like. It's kind of like amber colored. One thing I want to point out, when you use a clear primer like this, see how the concrete changed colors? It shows that it's soaked in, and that's a good thing. If it doesn't soak in, you obviously have a huge problem. One thing you want to do before you get going, wet your roller up in a puddle, because if you squeegee it all out and you don't have a puddle, you can't wet your roller up anywhere. So I got that done. I'll wet up my edger. That's done. Now when you pour puddles out like this with epoxy, we refer to those as ribbons. So you pour ribbons out. I normally go about every 4 feet or so, and then push your puddle around. I leave a little bit of a puddle around this perimeter. and then I can pull the material up the cove as needed to prime the cove. Now, I know I had mentioned this before, but normally you don't have to prime with the material that we're using tomorrow. This is a very unique material. I'll get into that material tomorrow as I install it. So going around the perimeter is always the most time-consuming part. Once you get out into the main floor, you can make some pretty good headway. I'm taking this 18, and I know I'm kind of blocking the view here, but I'm just rolling up the vertical with it. So incidentally, if ever you wanted to do a clear coat on a concrete, just a clear coating, which I run into often, people like that. This is what happens when you put it on. The concrete gets darker, almost like a brown color. So this is what a clear coat would look like. So I'm going to be doing this wood threshold under the door for no other reason, so it matches the floor because it's this ugly wood. So I figured I'll just coat it with epoxy and be done with it. So lantern flies are the issue this year. I don't know if lantern flies are all across the country, but we started coming around here, I don't know, 5 years ago maybe? Time flies. And they have just not been friendly to crops around here. I know the wine industry, I mean, who doesn't like wine, right? They do their fair share to grapes. Okay, it's my second batch. If anybody has drains in their garage, I highly recommend taking the drain covers off. It's much easier after you're done, if the drain cover is off, to clean around the inside edge there and put the drain cover back in. It makes the floor look so pretty. If you have a nice clean drain cover, maybe that's just me, but I kind of like that look. I always tell people to try to avoid putting epoxy down in direct sunlight. I'm in direct sunlight here. There's nothing I can do about it. I have a small window. I've been waiting for how long to get this floor down, and I just simply don't have time. We've been extremely busy at the store, and I do want to thank everybody who has been purchasing our materials and supporting us. I really do appreciate it. We've gone to great lengths to try to update our website and make things easy for folks. And I know myself and Jeff make ourselves very readily available to assist any customers with any questions they have on install. And we talk them through it and help them get their jobs done and create the floor they want and save a bunch of money in the meantime. So if you have a little bit left over, what I do is this technique. I don't know if you can really see it here. I apologize. Now the camera is going to be in the epoxy. But there's a little bit of a puddle here, so I come back again. I take weight off the squeegee, and I just kind of push the puddle backwards. And lose it back in the slab. And then when I back roll it, it'll just be distributed evenly. All right, so everything is squeegeed. Just going to finish rolling, and then we're done for the day. I'm just watching closely for bubbles now. Because I know I'm coating this at the worst possible time of the day. It's in the afternoon. It's hot. It's in direct sunlight. This is very porous concrete. So if you see a couple bubbles, before this sets up, just back drag your roller over one more time. And we're putting a flake floor over this, so even if there's a couple little bubbles, you're really not going to see them, but obviously you don't want bubbles if you don't have to. Yeah, this stuff that I rolled first, this is kind of getting pretty gooey. I can feel already I don't want to say it's setting, but it definitely is getting near the end of its life to be able to be rolled. All right. I don't know if you can see that. I hope so. I have that clamp down there. So I put these vice grips in here before I started. So now I'm just going to slide these down about here. I have one on either side. So now I'm just going to drop this door. All right. So this is what you see on the outside. Now I kind of beveled an edge in the front there. I don't know if you can see that very well, but I did that with the hand grinder. So there's a slight rounded edge in the front. But I'm going to leave this overnight. Tomorrow morning, I'll start with the polyaspartic. A lot of people always ask how I clean tools, and I never show how I clean the tools. It's windy. I apologize for the noise in the background. I took my microphone off. I'm just going to show you quick what I do. I have acetone and paper towels. This is easy. Done. So first I'll just take some dry paper towels. Wipe over that to get the heavy stuff off. was it. Now, whenever you clean the squeegee, make sure you lay it upside down at night so it doesn't lay on the blade, so you don't get a, I'll say a dent in the blade, because if it lays like that overnight, it won't push evenly in the morning. You always want to protect that blade. All right, that's done. Please put your lid back on your acetone, because somebody's going to kick it over. And never leave your roll of paper towels lay around like this, because I can absolutely guarantee you the wind will blow it over and it will roll like this right into your epoxy. It happens every time. Okay, here we are the morning after. It's around 7 a.m. I'm going to say 58 degrees outside. It's a beautiful day. Of course, it's coating day, which means it's windy. You can almost guarantee there's going to be wind on a coating day. So this is our primer. This is nice and hard now. We have our flake. I have a box with 40 pounds of Outback 517 flake. Here's our material. I'll show you how to mix this. So I'm just going to get set up here. We're going to video the whole thing. This kit is available on our website, concretefloorsolutions.com, and this is the 500 square foot Polyaspartic flake floor kit. We have chosen a tan base coat with Flake Choice 517 and full flake coverage. All right, I always put my flake in a bucket. It's so much easier to work out of a bucket than a box when you're trying to spread flake. So if you fold the bag back, pour it out of the corner of the box, it's much easier to work with. I'm going to fill this up. Now I'm going full flake on this. I have 40 pounds in this. I have extra over here. I have an extra 10 pounds. So 50 pounds is what's included with the full flake option for the Polyaspartic floor. So that's our flake. I'll show you the material now. All right, I'm hoping to use 3 gallons for this top coat. 3 gallons is included in the 500 square foot kit. This is our new material, CFS-1C Polyaspartic. This is a single component polyaspartic material that you simply roll on the floor, well, squeegee it out, roll it on, throw your flake in it, and you're done. It's an even easier top coat. Now, we do have to mix the pigment in this, and I'm going to show you how we do that right now. So here's the 3 gallons for sure. I'm going to need, we're going to put the 3 gallons in a 5-gallon bucket. Well, technically this is a 4-gallon bucket. I like to try to show as much as I can in detail so everybody sees exactly what has to be done when you're doing these floors. I have my trash can nearby. And while that is pouring, I'm going to get my pigments ready. Okay, that's all my clear. Now the pigment, I'm also going to get a paint stirring stick. So I'm going to pour the pigment. Now this pigment is not a catalyst. This is simply a pigment. So we're pouring this in here. We're going to stir it in at a slow speed. You don't need to do this at a high speed at all. All we're going to do is get uniform color and we're good. Doesn't affect the working time. There is no pot life. We'll have plenty of time to work with this. Now the reason we're pigmenting this base coat, for those of you who aren't familiar with coatings, even though we're doing full flake, in the event you miss a little area, whether it's a 1/4 inch chip size where the flake didn't stick or whatever, you want to have pigment underneath it. Otherwise, you're going to see the color of the floor, which is this. So we're just trying to make sure the base coat is uniform in color. I'm on low speed here, and I'm just going to mix this up so it's uniform in color. This is the tan base coat. Okay, that's it. Now I'm going to put this paddle in my trash can. Run it at full speed just to throw off all the extra. Going to get these out of the way. Less to trip over when we're done. And we are ready to apply. I have spiked shoes on. I'm going to start pouring this out. Now this has no pot life, so I'm just going to pour a little bit out here to get started. And leave the rest in the bucket for now. And leave the bucket sit there. And I'm going to take my squeegee. Now I'm not going to be coating this upper part here. I am going to be putting a wall here to cover this plumbing. So I'm only coming up to about here. So I'm intentionally leaving that area. If anybody asks why I did not do that area. Now, see, I'm leaving that puddle along the edge. I'm doing that on purpose because I need to pull this up the cove. If you're not doing cove, you don't necessarily have to do that. But as I come back here, see that little puddle I'm leaving? Okay. And I'm not pushing down very hard at all on the squeegee. In fact, I might be taking a little bit of weight off. All you're really trying to do is get the color on the floor here. And I always tell people, wet up your roller before you squeegee everything out because you need a puddle to wet these up good. I'm just going to wet that up there. After I wet that up, leave that there. I'm going to push a puddle down along here yet. Again, I'm trying to leave a little bit of a puddle along the cove so I can pull up there. Now a little trick here, I didn't pour any on here, I can, but what I'm going to do is take the squeegee backwards. I'm going to grab that puddle and pull it right up on the step. Pour material out there. Again, we're going to be back rolling all this to make it consistent. Consistency is very important with floors. I'm going to be pulling this material up the step here, so I'm leaving a little puddle there. Now with polyaspartics, typically, there's no way you're going to have enough time to do this detail work that I'm going to be doing right now. Because I have to coat everything, and then we have to flake everything before it sets, which typically would be an issue. That's why I love this material so much. And it's single component. This is like foolproof. Cool thing is too, when you're done with this job, you take the extra, you leave it in the bucket, put a lid on it, and you can save it for the next job. I mean, for contractors, that's important. I have to get my roller for the edges. This is my 6-inch edge roller, which I used yesterday for the primer. I'm going to wet this up in a puddle. All right, now, I'm going to start the back roll. Okay, so I'm using my 6-inch edge roller, and I'm rolling into that puddle that I left around the perimeter, and I'm just pulling it up and doing the cove around the perimeter with it. That's much easier than trying to do it with a brush. I would probably recommend to anybody to do the cove prior to doing the floor if you have a choice. I'm doing it at the same time just because I want to push the limits of the material to see how much working time I have. So again, just going around the perimeter, you can see me pulling it up the vertical there at the door sill plate. Just getting all the corners and edges the best I can with the 6-inch roller. I'm only going to need a brush a couple times throughout this whole job just to get corners and edges that you can't get a roller in. Once you get out on the main floor, you can make much faster time. So I'm just basically squeezing that out, getting nice uniform coverage. And then I'm going to back roll the first bit that I did just to get everything consistent. I left some slide marks in the floor from my spikes. So you want to make sure you don't slide in your spikes or it will leave a mark. You have to back roll over it. All right, so I'm going to throw some flake back here, and then I'll show you how to pull the verticals up. Now I'm going with a full flake on this. Now, I want to stop before I get to that edge there, because if you hit the edge, you can't roll right up to it without getting into flake. So I'm going to stop a little short. Ooh, that was a error. You don't want to throw flake on your roller. So consistency is very important with flake. So you want it to look the same. Now these verticals, there's a trick to the vertical. So I'm going to throw some flake in. Actually, it's sticking really well this time. Sometimes you need to use a spackling knife. And you hold the spackling knife down low and you pour some flake on it and pull them up. This actually seems to be holding pretty good. Yeah, if it stays like that, it's in good shape. Sometimes you need to fight them in there a little bit more. But this is why you have the base color underneath. So if you miss a spot, it's not very noticeable. And obviously you want your base color to complement your flake color. I'm just going to work my way around the perimeter trying to distribute flake evenly on the vertical cove. And for sure you don't want to slip in the flake, because if you do, now you're going to slide and displace the flake. I'm getting close to that edge, so I'm going to stop there. Throw a little more flake out here. I really don't want to do that yet and get into it with the fresh roller. So I'm going to pour more material out, squeegee it, and keep going. Now I am pouring all of the material out. This is 3 gallons. This is actually, I want to say it's 500. Let me look it up on my phone. I wrote it down. 521 square feet. So this is a little larger than 500 square feet. So I'm going to leave a little puddle again along this vertical. You always do that along the vertical, just so you have material to go up and over. Now, I'm going to push this puddle back. So I have 2 drains there, so you want to watch the drains, because what typically happens is the material will run into a drain when you're not looking. And before you know it, you look back and you're like, oh no, half a gallon of material just ran down the drain on me, which for obvious reasons you don't want. I'm going to move this brush out of the way. So what I do around the drain is I'll come right around the drain. See there's a puddle there trying to get in. And I'll leave it like that. You see that little puddle I'm leaving at the very end? It's like a 1/4 inch wide. Well, it's a little wider, but you just want to leave a little bit. That way you have enough for your roller, but it won't run down the drain on you. So one thing you have to do too is you have to look at your target. Your target is the end of the slab. If you're going and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm almost out of material, you might have to push a little harder on the squeegee to make sure you have enough material to make it to the end. You see the little trail I'm leaving? I had a little crumb caught in my squeegee. Well, there's the crumb right there, and it might even be a flake. But if you leave a trail, that's what it is. Sometimes you just pick your squeegee up and then go back down, and it goes away. Sometimes not. Now I'm getting close to the end here, but I'm going to have enough. So I'm going to take this bucket now. I'm going to set this on the cardboard there. And you see that little puddle I'm leaving at the very end there? I'm doing that so I can use the small roller to pull that puddle down. Okay. I'm going to leave a little puddle there so I can pull it up the cove. All right, now I need to find myself a puddle because I'm a little light there. So I have some extra puddle here. Tangled up in my flanks there. All right. Boy, that is like exactly enough. Again, we're 21 square feet over. This is 521 square feet. All right, now I'm going to do the edges, do the cove, back roll, and flake. Now this edge here, this I am going to do these verticals. So you have to be careful so you don't take the roller and pull up and slap the wall, because it tends to happen when you're doing this. So this is all the detail work around the perimeter that you typically don't get with an average floor, but again, I would recommend doing the stem walls or cove prior to doing the entire floor. It's a lot of detail work, and you waste a lot of time doing those edges while the rest of your floor is setting behind you. I was able to get it all in time, obviously, But if you're not familiar with what you're doing and you're taking a lot of time, I would highly recommend doing it prior to the floor. All right, I gotta throw some flake. Okay, so I continue flaking. You always do the vertical perimeters first. You're going to see me take a roller here, and what I'm doing is rolling over the edge that I coated already, but sometimes when you roll it freshly, the flake sticks a little bit better. So I just freshen it up, continue to flake around the perimeter. Once you get the perimeter done, the rest of the floor goes quickly. I'm trying to get this so I can step outside, do the rest of it, and then flake the rest from outside. All right, I'm going to step out, get this front edge, and then I'm done. Whew. Can work the front nose from outside, which makes it much easier than trying to bend over and work on that bottom joint. So I'm going to get all that detail work done, and then I'm going to continue throwing the flake after I get that front edge back rolled. So now I'm going to continue doing the flake on the front nose on the right half. I'm going to go over to the left half now, just do the detail work with the brush, and then continue the full flake over there. Okay, so we're back again. It's about 4 hours after we did this base coat with the flake. I wanted to come back about an hour or two ago, but we got hung up in the office. So if you look down at this floor, this is a heavy flake. You can still see the base color underneath it though. I still had another 10 pounds of flake to put on this, but I left that out. So I'm going to take a floor scraper. I'm just going to quickly scrape over. Now you have choices with this. You can either use a leaf blower and blow everything outside, but I can tell you now it's windy because we're putting coatings down. So if I blow them all outside, the wind is going to blow them in after I put the clear coat in. So I'm going to vacuum this instead. So I'm just going to vacuum everything now. Okay, now I am ready for the top coat. Now I do have to say, full disclosure, when I applied the base coat with the Cove, it started setting up a little bit on me on the end, so I had to move kind of quickly. So what I would highly recommend to anybody doing this, if you're doing the Cove, do the Cove first, then do your floor after, so you don't have that rush with time. You spend so much time doing all the details around the perimeter that the material starts to set up on you before you get to it. So that being said, we have everything down, we're ready. I vacuumed everything. So now the clear coat is easy. You just simply pour it out, squeegee it, back roll it, and you're good. I do have to add the aluminum oxide, which I'm going to show you how to do now. And we'll get this coating down. Okay, so now we're all set. I have all my tools out. It's the 18-inch roller, the 6-inch edge roller, and my squeegee. The aluminum oxide is what I am going to put on the floor now. So each kit comes with a quart of aluminum oxide. Each 500 square foot kit comes with a quart. So aluminum oxide goes really far. So aluminum oxide, that is aluminum oxide. It looks like white sand particles, but when you put them in epoxy or polyaspartic, they turn clear, so they totally disappear. So all it does is leave texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take pinches of this. I'm going to do this so you can actually see the pinch I do. But a pinch, literally a pinch, and I take it and I throw it up in the air, and I do about one of those in every 4 foot by 4 foot square area. You don't need a lot of this. So I'm just going to kind of get in a rhythm here, and I'm throwing this on the dry floor. What you can't see is when this hits the floor, it hits and bounces. Now when I pour my polyaspartic on the floor and back roll it, it's going to pick these little particles up, encapsulate it with the aluminum oxide. I'm just going to put a little bit right here. I want this to be good because that's the step coming out the door. It's going to encapsulate it with the polyaspartic, and that will give you the texture on the floor. So you see this walking a pattern here. Little pinches. Now this area right here, I'm going to do a little bit heavier because we normally walk in the door there and walk in the house. So this is the one area where I'll probably get a little bit heavier just because of that. All right, now I'm done. Now, if you look in here, you can't even tell I took any out. So I mean, this may have been, I don't know, half a pound maybe that I used. And again, it's a little over 3 pounds that you get with the kit. So the aluminum oxide is now distributed. Now I'm going to pour the clear coat out, do the edges, squeegee, back roll, and we're done. Okay, so now this, you can use this right out of the can. Since it's a single component material, you don't have to worry about mixing, which is huge. So that's it. There's our can of material. I'm also going to take a brush out there just in case. I have to get my spiked shoes on. Okay. So I'm going to pour a little bit around the perimeter. I don't want to get too far ahead. I'm just going to leave that like that for now. Set the can right there. I'll set the brush right there. And that's it. Now, again, you always need to wet your 18-inch roller up. Our roller is wet up. Our edging roller is wet up. And now I'm going to begin to squeegee. I know I had mentioned before, but I would recommend doing the stem walls and verticals prior to doing the body of the floor. If you go around with a 4-inch roller and or a brush and dip it in the can, you can do all that detail work first and then do the main body of the floor to make it easier and save much more time applying. So now I'm going around the perimeter with the 6-inch roller, and that little puddle that I left around the perimeter, I roll across that and pull it up the vertical wall. So now I pour out the next gallon. I'm just going to squeegee this out, and it goes much quicker once you get out on the main floor. And that's why you see me go fast on the main floor, and then when you get to those stem walls, that's where you burn a lot of time. So it is convenient with this material. You can actually do the stem walls first. So now I get the 3rd gallon, I pour that out. I'm going to squeegee that out quick. Again, it's going quicker towards the end. There's less detail stuff as I go. Since I'm dealing with direct sun, I'm going to leave this stuff in the shade. I'm going to edge this and back roll quickly. Always be very careful working in direct sunlight. It will make everything set up much quicker. So that's why I know you're looking at time lapse, but you have to move fast if you're in direct sun. So I get that half done, drop that door right away, then go on the other half. I'm dealing with the same thing here. I'm in direct sunlight, so obviously time is of the essence. You just want to get that down, back rolled, and get out of there before the sun starts getting it tacky. When the sunlight hits that, there's solvents in this material. They evaporate much quicker, and once the solvents evaporate, it turns gooey. So you just want to make sure you get that in as quickly as possible. I'm just going to detail these edges, and then I am done. Okay, there is the finished product. I'm going to let this cure for 2 days before I walk on it. It's actually been about 3 days. This is the finished product. It turned out absolutely beautiful. I did move my refrigerator back in here, and I put a slop sink in the corner. My daughter told me I have to hang this sign somewhere. This is the finished floor. The texture is absolutely beautiful. I'll be parking on this now. You want to wait at least 72 hours before you park on it to make sure it cures enough. Use a thumbnail test if you have to, where you push your thumbnail down for 10 seconds. If it leaves a mark, wait 1 more day. If you like what you see, please subscribe, hit the like button. We'll see you on the next one.